4 now.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Phil Goff.
Yes, indeed, the leader of the Labour Party is with us. It's been a few weeks, I think. Phil, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Wammo. Hope you had a good break.
Yeah, not too bad at all. Come back, though, with a wee bit of a head cold. I don't know if it was the comedy festival I went to on Friday night, but woke up Saturday morning with a stuffy one.
Yeah, that takes the edge off life, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Isn't it just? Now, let's get straight into it because there's a bunch to get through. You guys have launched your Stop Asset Sales billboards. Now, can we also expect to see billboards that say a vote for National is a vote for ACT?
Well, I would think so. I mean, what you've got is some quite close collusion between National and ACT. Can you ever remember a time in politics when two people from one party, the National Party, Don Brash and John Banks, take over another party, the ACT Party, while they're still members of the National Party and not members of ACT? It's all kind of bizarre. I think basically National welcomes having the ACT Party there as an excuse to move further to the right. They'll go into the election campaign promising to do all, things that are reasonably mainstream, and after the election they'll put in place a totally different agenda, and they'll say, oh, look, we had to do that because that was the terms of the supply and confidence agreement with Dr. Brash from the ACT Party. If the National Party is re-elected, you can expect to see a quite different New Zealand from the one that we see today. I mean, look, one of the most bizarre things that I can think of is Don Brash as chair of the 2025 task force saying he wants to cut the minimum wage by $100 a week. People that are surviving on $13 an hour, barely being able to make ends meet. He wants to slash their income by $100 a week while he's really comfortable that John Key and others have given themselves $1,000 a week in tax cuts. That's not the New Zealand I want to see, nor do I believe that's the New Zealand that most Kiwis want to see. That's not our country.
Now, if you're a paranoid sort of person, looking at the situation, you'd think there was some kind of conspiracy underway, that there were behind closed doors talks between John Key and Don Brash.
Oh, look, I've got no doubt that the National Party was aware of exactly what was happening, that they colluded. They saw, in the end, Rodney Hyde as somebody that was going to lose Epsom, only get 1.5% in the polls, and they didn't have a right-wing coalition partner. So they've actively colluded in that. I don't doubt that for a moment. It's not only a way, electorally to try to shore up their support, with a coalition partner, but it's also, as I said before, it's an excuse for National, if it were to be re-elected, to take a big jump to the right. Don Brash isn't talking about selling some of the assets, he's talking about selling all of the assets. He's not talking about cutting things like working for family at the edge. He's talking about slashing health and education expenditure. This guy is, in Key's own words, an extremist, but ironically, John Key said he's happy to get into bed with him. I've ruled out Hone Harawira because I regard him as an extremist. Absolutely. And Key can't be serious about Brash having unacceptable extremist policies if he's prepared to get into bed with him.
Now, is that so wise to rule out Hone? I mean, you might need all the friends you can get after the shakedown after the election.
Look, I got to tell you that Hone Harawira has nothing in common with the values that I stand for. He's extremist. He says extremist things. He doesn't want his kids to go out with Pākehā kids. He thinks whites are mother effers that ripped off Maori, just as a generic expression of his Pākehā brethren.
He doesn't fully believe all that stuff. You know that's just his bluster.
Look, if you say things you don't believe in, then you're a hypocrite. So he can't win on that front. I believe that he actually does think that way. He lashed out when he was on a taxpayer-funded trip meant to be chairing a meeting in Geneva, and he was holidaying with his family in Paris, and yet he says he stands for the poor and disadvantaged. He was happy to rip off the taxpayer, and that's what this by-election's about too. If he were to be re-elected in that by-election, it's about extra money for him. He gets paid more, gets more money for his Mana party, and it's a stunt to get some publicity. It's not required to get a mandate, and it's a waste of $500,000 of taxpayers' money.
So you haven't worked out whether or not you're going to stand a candidate there?
I've got to discuss that with caucus and then later with the New Zealand Council. So we'll take our time over that decision.
If you really don't want to deal with Hone, then why don't you beat him in the by-election?
Well, I've got to weigh up a lot of things in the council and the caucus of the Labour Party on that. But I stand by what I've said about this. A person who is elected in this by-election will sit in the House for a handful of sitting days before the House adjourns for a general election. It's not required. It's a waste of taxpayers' money, and it's simply a way for the Harawira Party to get their hands on a bit more taxpayer cash if he were to be re-elected.
Now, Phil, I think it's important we do cover off the story that broke last week, John Stevenson's investigation into the SAS and American torturing prisoners in Afghanistan. Now, all this happened, of course, when you were Defence Minister back in 2002. What did you know about the SAS handing over prisoners to American troops, and then those prisoners consequently being tortured? Yeah,
well, let me just correct something to begin with. Actually, what he was talking about was the recent handing over, he alleges, of prisoners by the SAS to the Afghan secret police. That's what the story was about. Back in 2002, at a time when our people had just gone into Afghanistan, they took about 50, I think it was, suspected Taliban prisoners. We, at that point, had no facilities for translation and no facilities for detention, and they were handed across to the Canadians and the Americans, and they were two fellow signatories under the Geneva Conventions that deal with the way in which you care for and keep in custody prisoners. And we did so, I suppose, with the expectation that they would meet those standards. Subsequently, after Abu Ghraib and the revelations of that, you'd have to have real doubt about whether you could have that expectation of how prisoners were going to be handled. But that never happened again under a Labour government. We didn't take people into custody, and it wasn't an issue. What the SAS, according to John Stevenson, has now done is handed people that they've captured to the Afghan secret police, and there's some real concerns if that, in fact, it has happened, as to what might happen to those individuals, given the track record of the current Afghan government.
So going back to 2002, at the time, though, after that happened, were you made aware that those prisoners were indeed tortured?
No. In fact, I've never had any information that they were tortured. That is the statement that John Stevenson has made, talking to some of them. I don't know whether or not that is correct. In the normal circumstances, of course, if with powers with the ability to get translation, you'd take the name and the details of any person handed across, and that would then be handed on to an international organisation like the Red Cross. That's how it should properly happen. I know that the SAS soldiers are people of high integrity. There has never been any allegations about wrongful action on their part. They would not have knowingly handed people across with the expectation that those people were going to be mistreated to the extent of being tortured.
Do you think there should be an investigation, though?
I think there are valid questions that there needs to be answers to, and that is what is with the SAS now working out of Kabul and working with the Afghan authorities. What are the guarantees that people that are captured and handed across for questioning are not going to be subject to torture? We're a signatory, as of 2005, I think it was, to the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. We have obligations in that area, and we should be meeting those obligations.
So what about our new or our next Governor-General? Is there questions that he should be answering?
Well, there are questions that would be put to the former Chief of Defence Force about what assurances were received and what happened. That's something that the government needs to answer on the advice that it was given, and the information that it has, and the assurances and the guarantees that are necessary that people taken prisoner are not going to be subject to arbitrary execution or torture.
Because isn't it concerning, though, that Mataparai might have known about this?
Well, look, I simply don't know. There's a bundle of allegations there. These relate to the time that National has been in office, and National is under obligation to answer those questions and to reassure New Zealand.
And so you're quite clear, though, that under Labour it was a squeaky clean slate.
There was well, first of all, we weren't aware at the time that the prisoners had been handed across, but subsequently, when we were made aware, and when some years later, when I became Minister of Defence, I asked the Defence Force to see if they could track those individuals as to what had happened to them. The reply that I got back was that, to the best of their knowledge, they had all now been released. I was never advised at any point that any prisoner taken by the New Zealand soldiers was subject to torture. Okay. That's totally new information from my perspective.
Thanks very much, Phil. Cheers for your time.
Okay, thanks, Wammo. Catch you later, mate.
See ya.
Bye.
Leader of the Labour Party, Phil Goff, there with us this morning.